welcome back to Cybos TV. Now here at Cybos TV we're going to make no apologies for coming back to a very big issue, that issue being big data, because of course it is something that is the talk of the convention, the talk here in Boston. So to talk about it with me, I'm delighted to have been joined by Patrick Craig from Ernst & Young, Jack Klink from State Street, Mark Evans, good morning to you Mark, ANZ, and Taylor Bodman on my far left, Brown's Brothers, Harriman. Good morning to all of you gentlemen. Patrick, I'm going to start with you. And of course we know that the issue of big data has been around for a long time, but what are the drivers that make this particularly important to the industry at this moment?
Well, I think there's a few drivers that are bringing this to the forefront of the financial services industry at the moment. I think probably the two off the top of the head that I see the biggest drivers, first being the regulatory pressures that are coming to financial institutions to provide greater transparency to regulators about their underlying risks. And big data, with its promise of better insight through data and analytics, is driving and satisfying a lot of that demand for greater regulatory transparency. I think the other driver as well, though, is more aligned to the strategies that financial services institutions are adopting around being better connected to their customers. So as we see from the web players, having good customer insights from your data is invaluable to better reach out to them. So I think certainly they're the two. One a reg challenge, and two, how do you better connect to your customers and provide insights to offer them better financial products in the market?
Absolutely. Well, Taylor, if I can come to you, how does the advent of cloud-based big data solutions expose risks in the compliance space?
Look, we're all familiar, I think, with the positive possibilities of big data, but there is a challenge side too, and I think we have a big problem. It's a problem that Swift perhaps can help us solve. And that has to do with getting data, the right data, into the right hands. And this is a real evolving space. We know what happens when we send money to the wrong place, but what if we send data to the wrong place? How do we resolve that? How do we correct that? That's something that is a space for Swift to enter in and to help us with standards.
What are the kind of worst case scenarios of that horrific picture you're
painting
there?
I think it's best to speak hypothetically.
Yes.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
And we don't want to tempt fate. But we, of course, have read about data breaches, some very large ones.
Yeah.
How will they be corrected? What's the right standard? We know when money goes to the wrong place, we have the concept of undue enrichment, how to compensate people for that mistake. There's a limitation of liability for the banks around correcting that problem. But in the case of data, we don't know yet how to manage that situation. We're still finding it out.
And Mark, I'm guessing, along with managing the situation, there's managing the reputational situation as well. What are the risks with that?
Well, there's a number of different areas that, big data provides us. On the positive side around managing our reputational risk, we're all worried about preserving our reputation. We use that as a differentiator, in the marketplace. But also, big data is a great opportunity for us to identify areas where risk may be occurring within our organisations that we currently don't have access to. So at the moment, say 70% of data is held not in a digitalised form, it's held in paper. And it's unrelated. So how do you then identify, perhaps it's politically exposed persons in one section, one geography? You may identify that and respond to it in that geography. How do you actually make sure that is consistently approached right across your footprint? So you're not, you don't exit somebody as a high-risk customer in one geography, but then merrily bank them in another.
Yes.
So actually you can pull all that information together. But the real opportunity here is to get, as Taylor said, to get the information into the right hands. It's not good enough to just get the data. It's about having the right people look at it and the right people interpret it. And the challenge for us is having people understand that just because you've got the data doesn't mean that you've got the answer.
Yeah. Jack, as Mark was saying, there are other risks or other issues that perhaps some people haven't even thought of that big data could be part of the solution for, aren't there?
Right, there's a ton of risks associated with how we take the business forward. I would comment on a couple of them. One is just storage. there's just so much data being produced right now. IBM estimates that 90% of the world's data has been developed in the last 3 years. So just enormous consequences for how do we keep all this stuff straight. And then there's security, as Taylor alluded to, breaches, issues that range from how do we protect the data inside the firewall, outside the firewall, in the cloud, not in the cloud. And then the last one I would mention is privacy. There's an awful lot of discussion around the world right now about privacy, and the rules vary market by market by market. So I agree with Mark, we're trying to get a consistent view around the world, but on the other hand, when you move in and out of different jurisdictions, the rules vary tremendously, and we have to understand the nuance of how people want their data protected and kept private in Singapore versus Switzerland versus the US.
And have you seen any developments, or positive developments in that area of international harmonization?
Minimal,
Yeah.
I would say.
Not really.
Not really, and not enough.
Yeah, see, that's a worry, isn't it? And I guess that brings us back to the word worry. A lot of people worry a lot about this issue, where as a consumer, as a practitioner, whatever, there's a trust issue with big data.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, consumers are raising trust issues with the web properties who are using information, perhaps unknowing to them, to generate insights about them. There are well-known examples in the press about people predicting pregnancies for individuals that are shopping from a certain store, or the breaches of information. I think also the EU recently introduced a ruling about the right to be forgotten, such as this consumer demand for protection of privacy, where you can go and submit for removal of information that's available on the internet. And clearly, as we explore big data opportunities for financial institutions, we have to understand and balance that with the views of consumers and public opinion around protecting privacy. And in many ways, we're trying to establish better trust with our regulators, but we can't do that at the cost of losing trust with our consumers and our customers.
Absolutely. Taylor, is there sort of best practice to be pointed at, particularly with the trust issue, but also with the sort of regulation issue, that some institutions are getting it better than others, doing it better than others?
I don't think so. There are better practices.
Right.
But we are at such an early stage. We will be at Sivos in 5 years and remark, can you believe how little we knew?
Oh, goody.
Back
There's
then?
something to look
There's so
forward
much.
to.
And there's a lot of great things that will come through. There's such a positive side of this, the insight we can gain by mining the data. It's going to help us, of course, physically, our own conditions, with genetic analysis, right? We'll build ourselves a fortress against disease. But there are a lot of problems with big data, and one man's teddy bear is another's monster. This is a really big, tough issue in which we're at early days. And there is room for best practices, room for industry groups to collaborate on developing standards.
Daisy, I think you hit upon the key word, which is trust. And Taylor and I, who work for these big global custodians, it's all about trust. I mean, clients around the world trust us with their assets every night, so they can go to sleep and wake up in the morning and know that they're there. So I think whatever strategies we choose to employ around big data and really trying to help our customers grow their business, it has to all flow back to trust, because the moment there's a breach, years and years or decades or centuries even in the case of our two institutions, they get wiped out overnight if there's a trust gap. So that's got to be first and foremost at the center of every decision we make.
And I'm guessing particularly for financial institutions where trust has been broken
Yes.
for different reasons, nothing to do with big data, a lot of institutions are on the back foot already, so that trust is even more precious.
Yeah. Well, but it also applies in terms of, the point there about jurisdictions and, different regulators, different jurisdictions treating privacy, ownership of it, in different ways. There's very little alignment. There's a lot of talk about harmonisation between geographies, but it's not happening. Generally, the response is, we'll harmonise as long as you harmonise with my approach.
Yeah.
Where
have we heard that one before?
Doesn't quite work. And the big challenge is, and I come back to reputation again, or the risk is that all this data that we've got can be very useful in the right hands, particularly when it comes to financial crime. Everybody wants a safe, secure financial system.
Yeah.
But the bad guys aren't constrained by geographic borders. We are.
Absolutely.
And we're at the front line trying to actually detect it.
It does feel like we're at the front line or the frontier of this, doesn't it? We're sort of climbing that mountain, but only at the foothills.
Well, I might add to that, because we often say in the industry, transparency is now the solution to this. But in data, it cuts both ways.
Yes.
There's a lot of data that should not be visible. to others, and people are trusting us to keep it tight, right, and private, confidential. On the other hand, our practices, and this is I think where you were going, our practices should be transparent. There should be a reliable, known way in which banks will operate with data.
Well, gentlemen, I could sit and talk about this all morning. I think there's a lot more ground we could cover, but we've run out of time. But I'm very grateful for you taking the time talking to us on Cybos TV. Thank you very much to Taylor Bodman, Mark Evans, Patrick Craig and Jack Klink. Many thanks to you. We'll be back in just a minute or so.